only expense, the large expenses, I would say, but obviously you can see why we need to do that. We have to pay for this platform. We have to pay for the staff that's going to run the platform. And those, I believe, charges are fair to the exposure that you will be getting. This platform actually can hold up to 30,000 people. So we're hoping, I mean, we know that last year 20,000 people were signed up to come to UN, and even though, you know, 40% usually don't show up, but the fact that they're signed up, they're getting the information, right? So the same here. So we're hoping that we can populate it with as many activists globally as possible. And there's also a lot of partnership spaces. For example, our planning committee this year is what we're calling a global planning committee. Instead of all of our local kick-ass activists that we've always worked with, because we're going global, we knew we needed the support of our global sisters. So we reached out to NGO CSWs in the region, Geneva, Vienna, Africa, South America, Asia, New York. I'm missing someone. You know our NGO CSWs in the South America, did I say that? Okay. All the regions.
Middle East.
I mean our region, yes, Middle East. I think I said that, but thank you. Yes, that's important. I was born in Beirut, Lebanon. I can't forget it. So yeah, we reached out to our sisters and they all absolutely stood up and said, yes, we'll help you. So our global planning committee are the co-chairs of our sisters in the region. And of course, the executive committee and whoever else they need to bring in that they need help. So it's going wonderful. We meet once a month. Subcommittees meet in between our monthly meetings. And like I said, the parallel event applications are out. And now the next big phase, which you're all going to hear about, and I expect your support in it, we're going to launch the platform ahead of time, hopefully this Monday. I think I actually need to do a welcome video and I just was not up to it. And today I figured I got all dressed up for all of you. So maybe I'll do my welcome video today and then we can launch our platform on Monday. Now, what we're doing with the platform leading up to the forum is we're opening up for advocates who want to sign up, who want to be on the platform as we build it. So in a way, you'll be part of this planning, if you want to call it in some way. But what happens is that, and again, I'm not a technical person, but please do ask questions in the chat if you don't understand something I'm saying. I'll try to answer it. Devin will try to answer it, or some of my executive committee members who are on here, they will ask you questions. So we're opening it up to what we're calling advocates, because we really want to build this community, right, of advocates who are taking actions globally and that we can learn from each other. So to sign up for the platform ahead of time as an advocate, we have two rates. We agreed on $25 or $50. Now, originally we thought $50 for everyone, $25 for either young, unemployed, or whatever, you know. But I really wanted to keep it completely open and up to you to decide if you can afford to pay $50 or if you can only afford to pay $25. Either way, you are on the same category, you have the same access. And what happens is that once you sign up, you get to see other activists who are signing up. You get to see the platform as we're building it, as we're adding information, exhibit booths, regional information, partnership information. We're partnering with World Pulse, who collect stories. There's a lot of other surprises that are going to be coming up leading up to the forum. So from now until March 15 or 14, anybody who joins will have to pay to join to get all of this information. And then at that point, we open it up to the world and it's free. Because the idea is that people used to, I mean, the way we have grown and added advocates is by making parallel events completely open in the past, right? We kept these parallel you know, when I first, there was, I think, 50 parallel events or 75. Last year, we scheduled 550 parallel events. And because it's virtual, this year, I expect it to be 1,000, maybe 1,500. Now, of course, that sounds overwhelming, but the way we are going to highlight it on the website is through regions, topics, language, regions, topics, language. So it's like there's a lot of categories. Which is one of the reasons why we're not limiting it right now. And obviously this is an experiment. We're gonna learn from our mistakes. I hope we don't make any mistakes. And I hope we're forgiven if we do make mistakes. But I have a feeling that it's going to work out wonderfully, because you can never have enough information. You can never have enough connection with activists globally, right? So the parallel events are gonna be open 24/7. You can sign up in any language that you want, because, you know, globally, there are people awake in South Asia that, you know, while we're sleeping, can enjoy networking with each other. Yes, so there's no limit to parallel events right now. That you do have to apply, as I said, to get onto this platform, even though we're going to keep it as open as possible. We have set up certain expectations, and you will read those. I mean, maybe even at one point, Devin can actually put the link for what we expect of all of you, the kind of behavior we expect of each other, the respect that we expect, on how we work together. So with parallel events as well, we are going through an application process. We have a committee that's going to see if what you are trying to do in that space is aligned with our purpose. The topics are a little bit wider. It's the priority theme, but it's also Beijing plus 25. And I don't know if anybody caught our humor. We put Beijing plus 25 plus 1, because we missed last year's Beijing plus 25. So it's 1 year later, but we need to address what happened with Beijing Platform for Action and what are we expecting. Of course, I need to give a shout out to my FW MAP family, who have been doing an amazing job. I hope they're on this call. So they will have their own space, and I can just imagine the activities that they're coming up with. So as we're nearing the top of the hour, I am actually more excited than you all for our panel. Oh, I wanted also to say that there are other events that we're doing. Again, I don't want to take up too much time. I wanted to explain how the platform works more than anything else. We will have an artisan fair. And Ellen Ferranti, if you're here, we are considering a rally, a global rally, because, you know, we can't physically be together. And we're open to ideas. Please send us emails and give us ideas. And I can't wait to read what's going on here. Somebody says, what is FW MAP? It's on our website, and we'll send a link too. Yes, that Dr. Ellen Ferranti, she's in for the rally. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to say is that I do have an announcement from some amazing, hold on, oh no, I shut down my, sorry. Sorry. I do have one quick announcement from members of our committee, Pamela Morgan and Susan O'Malley, and they're doing a project that I hope you all will be as excited as I am for. So in recognition of the 10th anniversary of UN Women, and in commemoration of the 20th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325, FW MAP, which you just heard about, and NGO CSW New York, proposed to do a reading of Lynn Notage's award-winning play, Ruined. Oh my gosh, I saw this on Broadway and it just was beyond. It won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama in 2008. Set in present-day Democratic Republic of Congo, Ruined focuses on the women whose bodies have become a battleground. We anticipate staging the reading in late winter, early spring 2021, again, leading up to CSW. If you are interested in trying out for this production, please contact either Susan O'Malley and Pamela Morgan. Of course, we will give you their emails in the chat right now, and this will be in the notes. And of course, as you know, we record So you listen and share it with people. So you can see how exciting that is. It's going to be fantastic, a reading of a play to inspire us as we organize. Okay, so any urgent questions? I see Devin is really on top of everything here. She's engaging with people. If there's nothing else, I want to introduce the co-chairs who worked on this month's panel discussion. And I want to introduce Azi, Safira, and I'm not sure if Margarita wants to join in, but definitely Safira and Azi, the floor is yours to introduce everyone to what you are trying to do with this panel discussion and then your speakers. Thank you all so much. We'll be back at the end. You know how much I love to open up the mics and hear everyone's voices. Enjoy the panel discussion. Keep engaging on the chat. Thank you for listening to me. I feel like I talk way too much, but I hope it was all useful information to all of you. Blessings.
Thank you so much, Huri, and hello to everybody and welcome. My name is Safira. I serve as a representative for the Baha'i International Community to the United Nations, and I'll be kind of moderating this section of our gathering together. So we're wanting to explore the theme of COVID-19 and ending violence against women. And we are kind of at this moment where the pandemic and the impacts of the pandemic have exposed vulnerabilities in social, political, and economic systems, and have in many ways worked to deepen pre-existing inequalities. So we're seeing that women, youth groups, civil society organizations that have played a very active role in responding to the pandemic, but they also remain excluded in decision-making bodies that are working to build what they consider holistic recovery plans. And we're also seeing that some of these interventions fail to account for the gendered impacts of COVID-19 and its pre-existing inequalities. So this includes heightened gender poverty, high levels of women's unemployment, the unequal distribution of unpaid care work, the underrepresentation of women in politics, and also drastic increases in gender-based violence. So today we'll hear from 3 speakers, but we're also very honored to hear from our Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, Ms. Dubravka Simonovic, who has kindly joined us today. So we'll start with her presentation. She will be speaking to her most recent report to the General Assembly this year on the intersection between the COVID-19 pandemic and the pandemic of gender-based violence against women. So we'll first hear from her. She will share her remarks. We'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. You're welcome to put your questions in the chat, and we'll have about 15 minutes for you to raise your hand if anyone would like to speak and ask a question. Following our Special Rapporteur's report, we will hear from a number of panelists who I'll introduce in more detail a little bit later, but who will be speaking about ways in which they have organized against gender-based violence at the grassroots. So very welcome to all of our speakers. Thank you for being with us. And I would like to turn to Dubravka Simonovic, our Special Rapporteur.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate at your meeting of NGOs, CSW, from different parts of the world. I would like to mention that I had really different connections with NGO CSW. In year 2000, I was chairing CSW. So at that time, I had cooperation with NGOs, but later on, I was in CEDAW committee, and I was at one point also chairperson of CEDAW committee, also connected with NGO CSW. And lastly now, in my post as United Nations Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, its causes and consequences for past 5 years. I will finish my term next year in June. I really very much enjoyed this type of cooperation with this very important platform working around each session of the CSW. And it was already mentioned that this session we missed, so I really support what was stated by a chairperson in her introduction, that we need to add this 1 year to the next session of the CSW. Somehow we have to go back to Beijing +25 and all those missed opportunities, what we did, what we prepared, but were not able to deliver. And the same was with my mandate. I prepared a lot, and then only one day, this was for the first time that I was not attending the CSW as UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women. So what happened then? Immediately after the CSW on 27th March, I have issued a press statement and I have called all states to combat violence against women during the COVID-19 pandemic, because we increased the number of media reports about increased forms of domestic violence related to lockdown measures. And basically there was no sufficient data and information. So I have also included online reference document on mandate's website. So you will see collection of recommendations done by UN Women, Office of the High Commissioner, regional bodies, other independent mechanisms, but also non-governmental organizations. It is useful to see how others have put forward their reports and recommendations related to violence against women, women's rights, and COVID-19 pandemic. And then also, I don't know if you're familiar, I am, as a special rapporteur, running platform of independent experts on violence against women and discrimination against women. Basically, those mechanisms that are established under different regional treaties or different regional organizations. It is 7 of us. It is CEDAW committee from the UN, then Working Group on Discriminatory Laws, and my mandate as a 3 UN monitoring mechanisms. From regions, we have Mesekvi monitoring Berem Dopara, Gravio monitoring Istanbul Convention, then Special Rapporteur from Africa and the African Commission on Human Rights, and Special Rapporteur on Women's Rights from Inter-American System. So it is 7 of us. We called ourselves IDRO platform. It is a platform of independent experts that are working on elimination of discrimination and violence against women. And you will find more on Mandate's website. So now when I was listening your chairperson speaking about the next CSW, immediately I'm thinking maybe at the next CSW you can invite all 7 expert mechanisms to attend any of your gatherings or meetings, and we can provide what we are doing, because we are now trying to issue a joint statement on different issues that are of common concern for all women around the world and all mechanisms. So we have issued a statement also related to COVID-19 pandemic and discrimination and violence against women. I have also called states that during this COVID period, I was not able to conduct country visits, and I have called states and other stakeholders to send me data about situation in their respective countries related to violence against women during the COVID pandemic. I have received 274 inputs, what is really huge and unprecedented. I have posed specific questions because focus is now on domestic violence due to lockdown measures and home that could be really very dangerous place if there are no safe opportunities for women to exit the home during the COVID pandemic. So based on all those inputs, I have elaborated a report and presented report to the General Assembly on intersection between 2 pandemics. Pandemic on gender-based violence against women and COVID-19 pandemic that in general have negatively influenced women's rights and lives of women around the world. So the main findings of my report are that intersection between COVID-19 pandemic and imposed gender-blind restrictive measures impacted women's enjoyment of human rights, and also exposed the exacerbated pre-existing gaps and shortcomings in prevention of violence against women. So we are seeing increased forms of domestic violence, limited access to protection measures, limited access to helplines and safe accommodation, limitation in accessing sexual and reproductive health services, and also lack of good comparable data. You know, from the beginning, we have seen many reports, there is increase of 30%, increase of 40%. On my question sent around, some states reply there is no increase of gender-based violence, there is no increase of domestic violence, there is decrease. So this is showing that this collection of data is not really at the level as it should be in order to track what is really happening in different countries all over the world. So, and what is also coming out, those pre-existing gaps, showing that there is a huge gap between international human rights standards and implementation at the national level. So now this additional intersection with another pandemic of this COVID-19 stopped what was in a process with respect to processes to address violence against women in different states. But there are also pre-existing legal and implementation shortcomings. For example, in some states, there is no recognition of psychological violence against women. There is lack of criminalization of marital rape. So if it is not criminalized, women could not call police. There is lack of measures. There is lack of services like shelters, like efficient protection orders, like helplines available 24 hours a day. So those pre-existing gaps are really different in different countries, and we need to measure them in line with recommendations that we have and standards in international instruments, starting from Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, but also CEDAW Convention and regional instruments. So it is also important to see that during all this period, we have seen additional pushbacks in different countries in different parts of the world. Rejection of ratification of Istanbul Convention. I have visited Bulgaria and I have seen what happened in their case because ratification was stopped at the level of the parliament due to misinterpretation of the word gender. Now we are going back to basics. So what is gender? How we are interpreting gender? They are all forgetting that in Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, it is clearly explained violence against women is a gender-based violence against women composed of different acts of violence, be it, and then it is a definition there. So we have to go back. We have to say it's from 1993. So we really need to uphold what we have adopted, and we need to focus on implementation. So my focus now is really implementation and implementation strategies, because this gap is really huge. And another focus is on data, because this collection of data that we have is really not showing what is happening in the world. So now we are also going to celebrate International Day on the Elimination of Violence Against Women on 25th November, and 16 days of activism. Many NGOs around the world are organizing many gatherings and meetings. And as a special rapporteur, I'm calling all countries to establish national preventive bodies, femicide watches, or observatories on violence against women. You will see that call on my mandate's website. I have started in 2015, and basically what I'm seeing from this exercise is that under those categories of femicides, and we can call it how countries are calling it. They could be called homicides of women that are gender-related, or gender-related killings of women in line with General Assembly resolution with the title. I prefer term femicide, but let us give countries freedom to decide terminology which they use, because they do have homicide data. And out of homicide data, if you pull out data on intimate partner killings, in which there is relationship between victim and perpetrator, it is in two cases, two groups: intimate partner killings and family-related killings. You have clear relationship between victim and perpetrator. In category of intimate partner killings, when you have this relationship between ex-husbands and ex-wives, or current partners, or those that are in intimate partner relationship, out of 10 persons killed, more than 80% are women. And this is coming out from statistical data that are collecting such data. So first is to have type of data clear, and then to have a focus on prevention. I am advocating that those bodies that could be also non-governmental organizations, independent institutions like ombudspersons, they should be also multidisciplinary bodies already established to work on violence against women. They need to look into all those cases, because they are not only numbers, they are stories, they are important cases of what happened to individual women in different countries around the world. And we are seeing so many similar cases. Through analysis of cases, they would be able to determine shortcomings in each and every country related to law or related to practice, shortage of, let's say, risk assessment, cooperation between prosecutors and police, lack of shelters. There are so many obstacles on a way to escape this lethal form of violence. And with this type of assessment of cases, these committees would be able to recommend measures for prevention of such cases in the future. And third leg that I'm adding also is remembrance of those victims of femicides. And now I am seeing from different countries such excellent work done by different NGOs based around specific cases, emblematic cases. They are showing them, they are having big gatherings, they are doing teachings at school in order to learn from those cases, in order to send good messages. Women are also marching on streets against femicides, against rapes. They are doing a lot of advocacy, and I hope that this Femicide Watch initiative will expand, because we do need something like this is implementation mechanism. And I will finish this presentation by my recommendations for the CSW. And I hope that you will support me on this, because during the past few meetings of the CSW, I'm always invited to present oral reports to the CSW. Although in my mandate, I'm invited to send all my reports to the CSW. So I'm sending reports to the CSW, but they are not visible. They are not on the website. They are not on UN Women's website. They are on Geneva's mandates website. So they are not really discussed. And this is in my mandate that I should send those reports. For example, this report on intersection of gender-based violence against women and COVID-19 is not going to be discussed at the CSW, and we need to discuss things like this at the CSW. I have also produced report on modalities on Femicide Watch, on obstetric violence, what is something new, on online violence, on violence against women in politics. So there are so many good reports that could be really addressed. And for that reason, I am suggesting that, and I'm proposing to states that CSW should be a bit reformed, and I hope that in the future we will have violence against women as a standing agenda item at each session of the CSW. We should not wait every 6 years to have violence against women in focus, because the world is different. We are seeing from this COVID pandemic, and each session of the CSW, violence against women should be at the agenda, should be discussed. And I hope that those mechanisms also see though that descending report to the CSW and now working group on discriminatory laws, that they will also be able to participate more actively. For example, interactive discussion between my mandate and states during the CSW should be also integrated in the process. But somehow we are not yet there. And I really admire what you, Madam Chairperson, mentioned, that you will organize a big platform with booths for different NGOs to present what they are doing. So we are so progressive with this. So we need to do the same for mandates, because we are somehow not really properly included in this whole system. So we should support each other. And I hope that we will continue this discussion before the forthcoming session of the CSW. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ivanovic, for your remarks. There's a lot of information that you shared with us in a very short amount of time. I see that there are a couple of questions and comments in the chat. So we will summarize those, but is there anyone who would like to raise their hand? You're welcome to raise your virtual hand. or just turn on your video and indicate to me that you would like to speak. We can probably just take a couple of questions, but if there was anyone who would like to pose a question to our special rapporteur today, you are welcome. So while people have their questions, I'll just raise a couple of things in the chat. There was one comment that asked whether you have any data on violence against older women specifically. There are a number of comments about language and how these concepts translate across the diversity of language around the world, understanding that this is a really evolving space, but there was a question around the term gender and women's issues and gender issues not always being the same thing, and potential confusion around that. So if there's any comments there. Don't know if there was anything else in the chat. I think those were the main pieces. Okay, so those comments, and then we have 3 hands raised, so that might be all we have time for. So we'll turn to Selena, Georgina, and Mandy in that order. So the floor is yours, Selena.
Hi, good morning from New York. My name is Selena Sharmin. My organization is New York-based nonprofit organization, NULUK, Women for Bangladeshi Women. This is a new organization, and I'm very blessed to be with you here today, all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Selena. Over to you, Georgina.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, great. I think it might tie in nicely with one of the comments or questions in the chat box that you mentioned on data for older women. So I work for HelpAge International and in the area of gender-based violence and violence against older women and men. And we're currently trying to sort of gather data on violence against older men and women. You know, if I relate it to the COVID pandemic, I mean, even before the COVID pandemic, there were issues with data collection, obviously, as you've outlined in your update to us, and obviously it's just highlighting the gaps that already were there, and I think, you know, there are various sort of initiatives to sort of challenge the exclusion. When we talk about older women, you know, the experience of older women in terms of gender-based violence, you know, they remain invisible from data sets on violence against women and girls. And with the Sustainable Development Goals, obviously there are initiatives where, you know, the cap on the age of 49 was removed. And so, but, you know, as you mentioned, you know, few countries have gender and age disaggregated systems in place for monitoring and recording and reporting of violence against older women. You know, some of the main global surveys, such as the Demographic and Health Survey, collects data only from women between 15 and 49 years old. And so, yeah, data collected on older age groups is rarely disaggregated or analysed. And I just wanted to understand whether, you know, this was an area that's kind of is being brought to your attention, and just what this, you know, if there are conversations on this, and currently whether it's being highlighted in relation to the COVID pandemic, particularly when we think of the effect it's having on older men and women specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgina, and we'll turn to Mandy. The floor is yours.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Mandy Marshall from the Anglican Communion. I'm really just wanting to ask about whether there is any disaggregated data on people that are involved with the faith in terms of violence against women and levels of domestic abuse globally, and even if that data is being collected.
Perfect. So we'll hand over to Dubravka to respond.
Thank you for all those questions, and questions with respect to older women and data collection, and also terminology that is now challenged by some groups and delegations. With respect to older women, in my reports, when I am looking on specific thematic areas, I am always looking at intersectional discrimination and different that are targeted more than others. So it depends on the topic that I am addressing, and then I am focusing on specific issues on which I have data. As a special rapporteur, I really rely on inputs that I am receiving. So for each thematic report, I'm having a call on my mandate's website, and I'm calling different stakeholders to send me what they have as key information related to different forms of violence against women. So it would be important to have more inputs with respect to older women. With respect to this Femicide Watch initiative, because this is something on which we can really have reliable, comparable data for all parts of the world, because this type of killings we are seeing everywhere. And what I have discovered when I started with this mandate in 2015, for example, official data collection at that time by UN Crime Commission in Vienna was not counting so-called honor crimes or family-related killings as femicide or gender-related killings. It was really that now they are on a different page. Now they have different report, also inclusive of gender-related killings of women, and gender and age is included. So here we are having first-time possibility to see what are family-related killings and what are intimate partner killings. Third category is other killings that are not having this relationship between victim and perpetrator. But what is the problem is that many states do not collect data in that manner. So they do not have this relationship between victim and perpetrator as a determination for collection of such data. And if you have gender and age, for example, in group of family-related killings, this is group in which we can determine what is happening with older women. And recently I have participated at one meeting on femicides organized by Latin American states, and it was stated that mothers are killed by their sons in a much higher number than fathers. So there are, from data, you can see really different things, and it would be good to have this objective, comparable collection of data, because now there is mixture of everything. In Latin American area, they are also counting only cases that are prosecuted by court as femicide cases because they have now a new crime of femicide. But now I'm saying we do not need in criminal laws new definition of crime of femicide. It is important to know that all those intentional killings that are happening between intimate partners or that are family related could be under this category, and we could pull them out, we could see numbers, and we can have femicide rate. But at the UN level, if you look at SDG agenda, and if you look at collection of data by the UN system, femicides are not there. In many countries, femicides are not seen as part of data related to violence against women. They're completely separate. So there are many things that should be changed. So with respect to data, we are having many challenges. It is good that there are different prevalence data collection every few years, but administrative data is something that should be pushed for in the future, because administrative data collected by police, by regular system, by social services, by all those that do have such data, but they need to segregate data differently in order for us to have really clear picture. So we need to improve a lot collection of administrative data, and I hope that this Femicide Watch is really providing good direction, because I have consulted all areas and what they are doing now in order to find how we can come together. And now let me go to terminology, because when I said femicide, then many states are saying, oh, no, we do not have femicides here. It's only in Latin America. But this is really very strange, because this gender-related killings of women are happening in all parts of the world. So it is not terminology, it is reality. And if countries would like to call those killings homicides of women in context of intimate partners, they can do it. But what is the key is to see that 80% of victims are women, and they need to employ different preventive measures. They need to see what is not functioning in a system. So in this case, for femicides, I am saying I'm using this term because this term is also saying a lot. But if countries are using other terms, fine, but let us have comparable data. For gender and gender-based violence against women, it is another challenge because now I'm seeing it in different parts of the world. Now they're misusing the term gender in order to block women's human rights agenda at different levels. For example, when I was in Bahamas, referendum was stopped because it was misinterpretation that gender is going to change the whole system. And you see it, and around Istanbul Convention, they have stated, even in my country, Croatia, that the school system is going to be completely different if we ratify Istanbul Convention, that is defining gender in line with what we already have in general recommendation of the CEDAW committee. If you look, and the common understanding that there are social roles that are different for women and men, that are clearly explained and so on. But in Istanbul Convention, there is definition, legal definition of gender that was not in legally binding treaties before. And many states are now using this to say this is something new. And for example, when I was in Bulgaria, they have never used differences between sex and gender. So they only use sex as a term, not gender. So now when this Istanbul Convention had sex separately and gender separately, it was explained that this is now a completely new concept that will that is not in line with the Constitution, and that will change everything. So basically, they have translated term gender in a completely new manner, and this term for this convention, and they have stopped ratification because they were afraid that this is something new and different. So there are many different things around different groups, but what I'm seeing is that they are using same argument, that this is going to ruin the family, that this is going to ruin education of children in the schools, that this is something new, not in line with culture and so on. And this is really not in line with what we have discussed in the Beijing, where gender is also normally referred to as a term. Then this declaration on elimination of violence against women, that is clearly stating that violence against women is gender-based violence against women. And let me mention a new general recommendation from the CEDAW committee that was done in collaboration with my mandate of a special rapporteur. We were together working on new general recommendation number 35 on gender-based violence against women, that upgraded previous one on violence against women. Previous one was general recommendation 19, because in the CEDAW convention there is no specific article that is addressing violence against women. And for that reason, CEDAW as a committee developed understanding that violence against women is a form of discrimination against women, and that was elaborated in General Recommendation 19 in 1992. And in 2017, jointly my mandate and CEDAW elaborated updated General Recommendation 35 on gender-based violence against women, and basically included a development of standards that happened from 92 until now, because now we have more knowledge about different definitions that are needed. And let me also mention, I'm now doing a report on rape and criminalization of rape in different countries. And it is clear, for example, that marital rape is not criminalized in many countries. The definition of rape is not done in line with international standards. That statute of limitation that is precluding women to report rape is too short in many countries. It's only 1 year or 6 months. There are so many obstacles. There is a victimization of re-victimization of victim during the court procedure, lack of rape shield provisions, and so on. So we really need to go back to implementation and to clearly press for good implementation of those standards that we have. We need to unpack them. We need to explain them in a simple language, and we need to have all women and men on our side in order to push this in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's so much to talk about, and I can see the chat is very, very active. So that's all we have time for with our special rapporteur this morning, because we want to move on to our next panel. But we will make sure to share the reports, these most recent reports, in our newsletter and on our website, so you can see more of what the special rapporteur has been working on. Dubravka, to have you engage with us at the CSW forum and on our virtual platform, and the suggestion of inviting the 7 mechanisms would be wonderful to include. I know there's around 180 of us on this call together today, and there's a wealth of experience, and I can see there's a lot of insight into this issue. So hopefully we can continue this discussion in the following weeks and months, and on this online platform as it goes live, we will be able to engage more there, and it would be wonderful to kind of hear more and draw on our diverse experience from around the world. So thank you so much, Dubravka, for joining us today and for sharing your insights.
Thank you. Should I leave now? I have some other things to do, or should I stay? What do you suggest?
You're welcome to leave if you have other things to do. We'll move on to a panel to hear more about violence against women at the grassroots level. So
I will listen a little bit more and then I will leave. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, wonderful. So our next panel, we'll be hearing from 3 wonderful speakers. We'll be hearing from Amanda Gwen from the US, Pauline Kenmonge from Cameroon, and Rahaf Dandesh, who is an activist in Lebanon. So we'll hear from them in that order, and I will first introduce Amanda. She is a social entrepreneur, civil rights activist, and CEO and founder of RISE, which is a non-governmental civil rights organization. And she was involved in proposing and drafting the Sexual Assault Survivors' Rights Act, which was the 21st bill in modern US history to pass unanimously through Congress. Ms. Gwen was nominated for the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize. And she has been listed in Times 100, Forbes 30 Under 30, and she has received the Nelson Mandela Changemaker Award. So I'd like to hand over to Amanda to share a little bit about her work against violence against women.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am so honored to be here. Admittedly, I am not a morning person, so I have many cups of coffee right now to keep me sustained. But I just want to say how heartwarming it is to have heard such incredible speakers before, familiar faces and new faces. For those of you who don't know, my background is actually in astrophysics. So I was at NASA. I want to be an astronaut. If you were to teleport to where I am right now, there are a bunch of space paraphernalia all over. And that's my first love. I came to the violence against women work and the sexual violence work because, like so many people who are in this field, I am a survivor of sexual violence. And I know that, the world may seem like it is on fire every day. And I know what it feels like to be scared. I still remember after my rape feeling so much despair. I remember I was raped on campus at Harvard, and I remember going to the hospital, getting my rape kit examination. Mine was 6 hours long, and walking the next morning out of the hospital, and the hospital administrator handed me a voucher to go back to the place where I was raped in my dorm. And I felt so lonely. I'd never more fully understood the definition of lonely than at that very moment. And I remember the sun still rising and thinking, well, where do I go from here? But as I turning to Google and trying to find out, well, what human rights am I afforded? What are my civil rights in this country? And discovering this huge patchwork of civil rights that are afforded to rape survivors in the United States, and discovering that those sacrosanct laws that we were raised with aren't actually applicable to rape survivors, that equality under the law isn't actually applicable to, at least at that time, my situation. I felt this fire that was growing up in me. It was anger, to be very honest. And when I discovered that my rape kit could be destroyed before being tested, that there are rape survivors that were being thrown in jail so that they would be guaranteed witnesses for trial, that there were rape survivors who were being denied their basic patient medical records, their police report, I decided to rewrite the law, and that resulted in the Sexual Assault Survivor right passing unanimously. But that's where the story starts. You know, I wrote it as a matter of survival. That's what I did with my fire and my pain, but the work isn't done. You know, and I think everyone on this call is a testament to the fact that the world is going through a moment of reckoning right now. The pandemic is unprecedented in many ways, but in you know, there's one way which it's been tragically predictable, and just as we've seen in the wake of many disasters, the spread of COVID-19 is being trailed by a surge of sexual violence, domestic violence, and RISE has been fighting to make sexual violence a priority among world leaders in the form of a universal survivor bill of rights. So I'm going to be sharing a presentation that I put together in a little bit, which talks about this. And you know, there are at least 1.3 billion people around the world who are sexual violence survivors. That's a World Health Organization statistic, but that statistic doesn't take into account men and boys who are also survivors as well. So 1.3 billion is still a under estimation. But it is so great to see, again, people organizing in NGO, CSW like this to talk about these issues. You know, when the pandemic hit, the world learned how to be virtual. We're still learning how to be virtual. And grassroots virtual organizing is RISE's bread and butter. So we're fortunate to have developed these skills, but also in the pandemic have passed 3 more laws in the United States. And honestly, I'm very proud of my team because we had no expectations. We didn't know what this landscape would look like. You know, for us, peace is not the absence of visible conflict. Access to justice is a necessary prerequisite to true peace. So survivors' lives are the invisible war zones that corrode human potential, hold back the promise of a just world, and we can all hold a light up to this darkest corner of human experience. And allows survivors to be believed, empowered, heard. I'm speaking to the choir here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with sharing this screen. And I want to talk to y'all about some of the exciting things that we have coming up. Can everyone see the screen that I've shared? Okay.
Yes, I can see it.
So this is one of the testimonies I did in the United States Congress, but I'm gonna go down. So I've already told you about the inception of RISE. Here are our teammates. This was at the UK UN mission. You know, we've passed 32 laws, which makes us the most successful legislative reform movement in modern US history in terms of efficiency, because our laws have all passed unanimously, and that impacts a little over 84 million survivors here in the United States. What we have been fighting for the past 4 years and organizing at the UN level is the universal survivor bill of rights that I mentioned earlier. So the UNGA has never passed a resolution that's solely focused on sexual violence survivors' rights. It's been in the context of using rape as a weapon of war. It's been a subcategory within violence against women, but there hasn't been one that is exclusively focused on access to justice for survivors of sexual violence. So that's what my team and I have been fighting for. The reason why we have been doing this is because after President Obama signed our federal law, the Sexual Assault Survivor Bill of Rights, in 2016, we heard from over 1 million people. It went viral here in the United States and abroad when we heard from all corners of the world saying, hey, I'm a survivor too. either, this is something that I'd like to fight for in my own country, or this is something that I've been fighting for already for a couple of years, for a couple of decades, and we should team up. So quite honored to be carrying on this work with that incredible team. Here are some of the things that I mentioned here. And one of the things that we're fighting for is not only for a resolution, but for it to be reoccurring, so that this is a continual dialogue among world leaders. And driven by all this as being survivor-centric. The people who have the solutions to the world's most pressing problems are the people who live that problem every day. The stakeholders that we have are member states, of course, for the resolution, civil society, like this amazing group on right now, and utilizing the arts. So people within culture and social figures, and I want to talk to you about Rise Champions. So Rise Champions is us leaning into that last column, but definitely also utilizing the first two of our three pillars that I showed in the other slide. Rise Champions is meant to build a coalition of people who are dedicated and committed to making a priority rape survivors' dignity. And what that means varies, but what we're trying to do is modeling off of, for instance, he for she champions and gender champions within the UN circuit. We are trying to do that specifically for rape survivors. So here are our current Rise champions. And for the upcoming day, I have to get this name right because it's so long, for the elimination of violence against women. I think I got that right. So for that upcoming day, we're going to be doing a hashtag Believe Survivors social campaign. And we're so grateful to all of the different Rise champions who have already, in order to be a Rise champion, they've already made a commitment in their context, and I'll talk about that too. So these are also some of the people that we're currently talking to. It really spans the coalition spectrum. And that's because we want to be able to involve people to really commit. It's both being able to work with survivors in their community and also, make, again, this proposal and a plan to really advance rape survivors' rights. We earlier this year with Nadia Murad, one of her things was co-hosting a virtual briefing with us. It's meeting with survivors from your community and all the way to President Bio declaring rape as a national emergency and working to create a trauma-informed criminal justice system and specifically medical process for survivors. Okay, this one was really fun. So in an effort to bring in the arts, bring in culture, one thing that we are doing is throwing a survivor fashion show that is centered around our UN international coalitions. During Fashion Week, what I realized was that the most commonly asked question is, oh my God, I love your outfit. What were you wearing at that show? And I realized that I had been asked this question before in my life after my rape. What were you wearing? And it's the exact same words, but it has dramatically different context. And one, it's empowering. It's your choice about what you decided to wear to feel good. And another one, it's shaming you, blaming violence against you, on you. And we want to take back that statement. So what we're doing is we are holding New York Fashion Week's first ever rape survivor fashion show titled What Were You Wearing? And there are going to be survivors walking the runway and taking back that statement. And the best part is they're going to be walking not alone, but with an ally. So someone from their country, a celebrity, a influential figure, who is walking hand in hand with them to say that survivors deserve justice. This is not tied to the resolution, but it's more about an empowering, exciting, and positive event that's meant to uplift spirits and still engage in a very difficult subject with a positive environment. So each couple, so each survivor and ally will be paired with a designer so we can maximize the amount of involvement within the fashion community. And then following that will be an arts reception where, people who are different forms of arts and not necessarily fashion can present. And all of this is COVID contingent. We wanted to do this during New York Fashion Week always is very close to either CSW or the GA. And we wanted to do that to have, for instance, first ladies be able to walk with a survivor from their country. That's an example, but this is something that we're still continuing on. We have some fun people who are already confirmed, and we're always looking to build coalition. So if you're interested, please let me know. And then I did mention when I started off that I am a nerd. So following my my space background, what you see here is a margarita in space. And this is an example. So quick brief background. For those who may not be familiar with an astronaut's journey into space, many astronauts, when they leave Earth for the first time, experience a psychological effect called the overview effect. It's described as, well, this humbling, awe-inspiring moment where you see everything that's ever lived or died on this pale blue dot, and you realize that we're all on this together. We're on this spaceship Earth. Essentially, many astronauts, especially the Apollo ones, especially the ones who've been to the moon, have had a profound experience. Essentially, it's an existential crisis. But this crisis is described as astronauts leaving the Earth as technicians, but returning to Earth as humanitarians, profoundly moved to try to change the world in some way. At the heart of what RISE is doing with the Universal Survivor Bill of Rights, with the coalition building, is to say that justice should not depend on geography. And so in a merger of all the things that I love, space and art and justice, we are going to be building a spacecraft similar to this with the bill attached to it. It's going to be the first bill that's ever been flown in space. And we're attaching a GoPro. And this one we can do remotely because we'd like to invite people to tune in and watch the corny, but the rise of these rights. Yeah, so it's a way to, again, be incorporating different fields into this issue that we're also passionate about, and raise awareness about the hard, tough subjects, but also inject a little optimism into it. So that's if anyone wants to, or if anyone's interested in anything else, please feel free to email me. I'm so grateful for this time, and I just want to end with a story. The first time that I talked to members of a state house, it was again 6 hours of people just telling me that they had an election to worry about, or this issue wouldn't get them elected because that's not what they're known for with their constituents. And it was pretty brutal. So I went home and I cried. And the next morning, as the pathological optimist that I am, which is somehow, I think, related to being an advocate and an activist still, I got up again. And this time I went to the United States Senate. And in my ride to the Senate, I met this Uber driver who was kind of intimidating. And he didn't really talk to me, but at the end, he saw that I was going to the Senate. So he asked me, why are you going? And I told him, and this once intimidating man just started crying. His tears just started welling out of his eyes. And he turned to me and he said, my daughter's also a rape survivor. And she also was asked what she was wearing. And she went through a lot of the things that you went through. And so when he stopped the car, when our ride ended, he said, can I shake your hand? Thank you so much for fighting. for my daughter. Has anyone told you that they love you today? I love you. And, you know, I'll never forget that, Dad. So what I'm sharing this for is, you know, I just want to say I am so grateful to obviously NGO CSW, but also to everyone who's on this call, to all the previous speakers as well, because, you know, the work that each and every one of you do obviously touches the lives of, you know, the people that you're serving, but also their family members, and from wherever you're calling in around the world. I just want to express that deep gratitude. So thank you so much. And again, please feel free to email me. You can check out my Instagram as well, and Rises. We keep up to date with a bunch of our programs. But yeah, we're really looking forward to continuing in this community. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was such an inspiring, well put together presentation, and it's so wonderful to hear about this work. And I really do hope you continue to collaborate with NGO CSW and the virtual forum moving forward. It'd be great to have you. Okay, so I see that the chat is very active. Please feel welcome to continue posting in the chat, but I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Pauline Kenmonge from Cameroon, who is an active promoter of women's and children's rights, and she's focusing on the popularization of laws in which women and children are at the center of development, as well as the implementation of these laws. She has over 20 years of experience in sexual and reproductive health and rights advocacy, and has been an organization with the Virtual Feminist Advocacy Training and Community Dialogue on Generation Equality. So I'd like to hand over to Pauline to share from her perspective about the theme of violence against women.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Please, I think that you can allow me to speak in French, because in English I will not feel free. I will not feel at ease. I don't know what to do now. Can I speak in French?
We don't have any translation, unfortunately.
I have a translation, but okay. I'm supposed to talk about effect of COVID-19 on violence against women in my country. What I would like to say is that we have already also experienced the COVID-19 pandemic. The first case was reported on March 6 this year, 2020. On March 17, 13 government measures were taken, supplemented by 7 others measures on April 9. As of April 30, Cameroon already had 2,069 confirmed cases for an 61 deaths. 71% of contamination cases are men. That is the statistic, the data from the Ministry of Health. Everyone was convinced that the arrival of COVID-19 in Africa was going to be a disaster. But the population, without necessarily waiting for the help of the state, took the bull by the arms and committed themselves to the fight. Strict respect of the usual barriers, wearing their mask, hand washing, and so on. Even the association, the platform of Beijing 25, we went out in the community to sensitize, working on talking about generation equality. We went to the field to raise awareness among the population. We offered them masks, buckets with taps, soap in rural areas, and so on. We did it in different parts in the country. We have also translated the message into the local language and rented a car equipped to carry the message to the villages in local languages. We have a fragile past with regard to Africa in general. We have a pandemic as Ebola, AIDS, and now we had a regard, a particular regard to such a pandemic. When a pandemic is coming, we have to be very, very ready. So it was our interest to adopt barrier methods. But the violence has increased during this period. The COVID-19 pandemic has increased violence against women and children since its beginning. This is justified by factors such as alcoholism, smoking, stress, and anxiety. The context is strongly marked by the absence of places to report any manifestation of violence. I want you to hear that the context is very, very difficult. When you are a victim of violence, you don't know where to go, who to speak to. It's too difficult. Wherever you are a woman, a child, a man, you cannot go elsewhere, everywhere. There is no space where you can go and speak. According to UN Women, the reduction of mobility have led to an alarming increase in domestic violence and gender inequality in households. But the situation of women in Cameroon, it's very, very, I don't know what I can say, it's particular. So women in Cameroon, even before COVID, they are weak in Cameroon society because of their condition, which is still precarious. The patriarchy that reign does not always leave women the latitude to defend their rights and participate fully in decision cycles. Politicians do everything possible to ensure that women are able to maintain themselves at a fair level of welfare and social protection. That's all. They can never control the situation. Among the barriers that prevent women from reaching the level of control and parity, we have the following: the inequalities of opportunity that will lead her through her life, access to credit, access to employment, opening up to the informal sector because it is more available, access to health, water, hygiene, and sanitation, the difficulty of access to the so-called scientific series, early and forced marriage, the non-inheritance of the girl child, and access to land for rural women. The precariousness of women living in marriage concludes without marriage certificates and who have no legal status other than that of simple concubine and so on. And those women who are living with an intimate partner, they cannot speak anything because they do not have any rights. They cannot complain. When you go and complain without a marriage certificate, they cannot even hear you. So we cannot end this presentation of this table without saying that for the last 4 years, the country has been experiencing a social crisis that is creating many internally displaced women and children. Some of them are difficult to identify because they no longer have national identity cards. In addition, nothing has been done to accommodate them. No shelters, no camps have been built. Sorry. We are all witnessing a massive exodus of those women in the big cities who sleep under the veranda of shops at night, with young girls who have become heads of households and who swell the ranks of prostitutes. These people have chosen to settle in insalubrious neighborhood with a high degree of promiscuity. With the advent of COVID-19, the situation of women has several consequences on their daily life. They will present some of the difficulties, we will present some of those difficulties experienced by women and linked to the pandemic. Women in social work. In Cameroon, we have more than 85% healthcare workers, they are women. They are more exposed to high risk because they are not sufficiently protected. To this category, we can also add female teachers, especially in primary and secondary school. This is one of the categories that has suffered the most from the pandemic. Why? The masks are distributed to them as a trickle. Gowns and other gloves are not acquired. Some reported that their husbands asked to resign to protect the health of the family and their children. Others said that they have relocated the children to other family members to sleep in separate rooms, which creates additional cost for nutrition. Nurses in the private sector complain also because the attendance at their centers has seriously declined, especially for prenatal visits. Patients have begun to treat themselves because that they start talking about this pandemic, people were afraid. They did not know more. They refused to go to the hospital. This has resulted in a loss of income for private training and has had an impact on the salary of women employees. Women at home are exposed to the presence of children eating at all times, while the ration has not increased. Some husbands whose wives lost their jobs did not provide the expected support at all. Several families are unable to meet their electricity and water bills and are threatened with eviction for unpaid rent. The situation leads us to meet some promoters of private schools who say that salaries are paid with the school fees paid by the parents. Thus, some parents have not finished yet paying the school fees, and therefore they do not have money to pay the teachers' salaries. Others believe that any salary is the counterpart of the work done, and if people do not work, they cannot be paid. So women working in the private sector, some women working in the private sector, some were tested positive at COVID. They were confirmed and notified that they will not have their month's salary, even though it was proven that they were contaminated at the place of work. The others did not receive a salary due to lack of performance. The company did not operate, it could not produce. In small trades, this is where we can find many women in our country. Domestic servants, washers, ironers. The advent of COVID-19 has led this category to understand that women are the ones who pay them. Because if you have a woman who comes to help you, the woman, you are the one to support her salary. It's not the man. So they spend the day away from the home looking for another job. Some bosses have asked their employees to abandon their family life to come and stay because they are afraid of being contaminated by the comings and going of the workers. In this category, we do not fail to mention those whose activities revolve around bars and other takeaway sales as fish, chicken, corn, and so on. So women and health. Pregnant and lactating women stopped going to prenatal visits for fear of becoming infected and putting their children's life at risk. The director of a large public hospital in the area even acknowledged that the vaccination rate has dropped from 300 children per month to less than 100. These women are living in anguish and they need for psychological help and support. For women living with HIV, they refuse to go to the hospital because they say that they are exposed. They are more exposed than other women. So they were afraid to go there for their medication. So there is no data to support this information because COVID-19 puts people all over the world on equal footing. Nobody knows what to do. Some women are aware of the effect that not taking ARVs could have on their health because of this failure. The stigma of people living with HIV will have to be really fought against, especially women. Okay, for young girls, those who are on contraceptive were afraid to go to hospital to look for the pills because hospitals are places where you can easily be contaminated. In addition, these services have become virtually non-existent because all staff are focused on fighting COVID-19. Some have switched from pills to injection, and others say that if their pills run out, they start the morning after pill, which can be easily purchased at the pharmacy. They told me the name, RU486, or by calling a certain number, Lisa, and so on. You can have the advert in the radio and so on. Other girls and girls, boys, men, women, on the other hand, seriously complain about the sexual and incestuous violence they suffer from neighbors, parents, cousins, and other siblings because of the cessation of classes. The impunity that reigns in our country does not encourage them to complain or to break the silence. Some girls have stated that they will not go, they have not gone to school because they are pregnant, and they are frustrated. They don't know what to do, where to go. You cannot even start to complain because there is no space for that. According to internally displaced women, there are those living in refugees, in neighborhoods, and insecure settlements. So it is difficult for them to apply hand washing and social distancing. Shelter conditions make house overcrowded. So lack of access to water and sanitation can increase the spread of the virus. Adherence to recommend hygiene measures result in additional work for displaced and refugees girls and women in the burden of providing water and maintaining hygiene. That is very, very difficult for displaced and refugees women and girls because they have difficulty to access water and so on. For rural women, they suffer great losses because they were not informed of the situation of the barrier measure and harvest their products, which rotted because they could not easily be moved because of the difficulty to go from the rural area to the town. The poor organization of sales on the market did not at all favor these women. For example, we had the tomatoes could not longer be exported to the boundary country because the boundary was closed. So there were too many losses in tomato affair. So in the couple, it was difficult for husband and wife to live in peace because everyone tried to discover the other for the first time. We have never faced a situation where woman and the boy or the man or the friend was obliged to stay at home. So we met, for instance, some transporters that transport goods from Cameroon to boundary country. They told us that it is difficult for them to stay at home. It was a great experience for them, and they were feeling so bad. Initially, for about this barrier measure, we can say that the population took it. However, it should be noted that they did not appropriate, they were not used to, they were not ready to change their ways of living. That is the really problem with the barrier measure. So as soon as the government has to resume with school, everything changes. So that is the challenge we are facing now. So in conclusion, we can say that the effect of COVID-19 affects all humankind, but in different ways. Men, women, boys, girls are the victims depending on the role they play in the family and in the community. Women are the primary caregivers for children, the elderly and sick family members. Girls who also contribute to family burdens are more likely than boys to be at risk. Elderly and other sick people are a greater risk as closed schools created extra work for women with effects on their health. Most health and social workers are women, increasing the risk to their families. So the rate of domestic and sexual violence increased as tension related to the pandemic increased also. We have many cases. We have fathers who rape the child, the proper girl child, the neighbors. You have also sexual intercourse between brothers and sisters. We are facing that. And today they are pregnant. What to do? What do they do? Where do they go for? Who do they speak to? That's the problem. So stress, smoking, alcohol consumption, and financial hardship due to the job loss and unemployment are triggers for domestic violence. So recommendation, what I can do is that raising awareness about hand washing and the wearing of masks in all city and rural areas. That is very important. Awareness raising and support of government to promote access to social security for women working in the informal sector, and especially access to credit with flexible measures for women who want to return, and better access to land for rural women. Strengthening of protective equipment for women health workers. So they have to strengthen their capacity to protect them. Prioritizing adolescent girls and women in the consultation process by ensuring that they have a predominant voice in the water facilities will be an asset. Provide also psychological support measures to population to help them become more resilient. That is the recommendation I can give according to the situation in our county. Thank you.
Pauline, thank you so much for giving your presentation in English. It was excellent and such a rich account of all of the ways that COVID has impacted the daily lives of women, everything from healthcare to those living with HIV, the impact on salaries, the impact on families and young girls. It's a very comprehensive presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I would like to introduce our final speaker with us today. So Rahaf Dandash is an activist from Lebanon, and she is a caseworker in the anti-racism movement. And she's currently working with migrant domestic workers in Lebanon to support them in cases of labor exploitation, violence, abuse, detention, medical needs, and racial and gendered harassment. So I'd like to hand over to Rahaf to share with us a little bit about her context in Lebanon.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly. So I'm going to try to be quick because I was told I have like 5 to 7 minutes and I want to keep space for questions and many people. So basically, I work with the anti-racism movement, and we work on advocating for the rights of migrant domestic workers that are around 200, because in Lebanon we have around 250,000 domestic workers coming from African countries and from South Eastern Asia. And we are trying to advocate for their rights, and because mainly migrant domestic workers in Lebanon face a lot of racism, and they are subjected to a specific system when they come to Lebanon that is called the sponsorship system. So the sponsorship system is basically when domestic workers come to Lebanon, she has to be under the sponsorship of a Lebanese employer, and hence she has to work as a live-in domestic worker in their houses, and she has no right to quit, she has no right to change her work conditions. She has zero protection from the government, in the sense that she has there is no reporting mechanism in case of violence, in case of labor violations, in case of sexual harassment or unpaid wages. So what we're trying to do is that we're trying to advocate and we're trying to support migrant workers and advocate themselves in order to abolish this sponsorship system. So this is a very quick introduction. And of course, to mention something that is very important is that these domestic workers, they are excluded from the labor law. So the Lebanese labor law does not consider domestic work as work, and hence they are excluded from any protection that might be given. Whether Lebanese, Palestinian, Syrian, or even migrant, all domestic workers, they're not protected by the Lebanese labor law. So since the COVID-19 started, things have been much worse on domestic workers, because mainly if we want to talk about live-in domestic workers, and if we will also talk about live-out domestic workers. So live-in domestic workers are people who work in the houses, and because of the work conditions, they have very limited to zero freedom of movement. They don't have a lot of contact with the outside world or with their communities. Many live-in domestic workers face a lot of domestic violence. They are locked in their rooms. They don't even have a private space to sleep at. So we have many domestic workers who sleep on the balcony or in the living room or under the stairs, for example. We have many people who have been facing sexual harassment from their employers, from their families. They are always overworked. So this is the normal situation before COVID. So they are overworked. They work at least 12 to 14 hours, sometimes even more. No day off, no sick leave. They don't have access to healthcare as well. So even when a domestic worker is sick, she has to go to the employer and ask him to take her to the hospital. And hence it depends on the willingness of the employer if he really wants to take her or not. So this is why many people refer to the sponsorship system as the modern slavery system, which is true. So what happened after the COVID-19, and to also mention that in Lebanon we have other factors that have made the situation much worse, which is the economic crisis that we are currently facing. So just to give you a quick context about Lebanon, there have been economic crisis, and the value of the Lebanese currency has lost almost 60% of its value. And we also had a revolution for months, and then we also had a lot of people losing their jobs because of this crisis. So many people were affected by everything, but the first people that were affected were refugees and migrant domestic workers. What happens is that many workers lost their jobs, and they were even fired on the same day, and they were not even given any compensation, again, because they're not protected by the labor law. And when they lost their jobs, and we're talking about people that had no jobs for months, they hence lost their ability to pay rent, to afford food, to secure the basic needs for their children. So actually we were receiving a lot of requests and we talked to many communities on the ground to find out that many domestic workers had no access to food and were facing even a threat of eviction, and people were actually evicted. And this is, at some point, we had tens of domestic workers protesting in front of their embassies. Either they were live-in domestic workers, and hence their sponsors decided that they do not want to pay them anymore their salaries, or they cannot afford to pay them or to bring them back to their countries. So they were actually sending them by taxis and throwing them in front of their embassies, and just like with their baggage, etc. So the situation was very traumatic. Or actually domestic workers were kicked out of their houses because they couldn't afford basic rent, and hence they also were sleeping on the streets. I'd like to also mention that we had noticed an increase of violence and sexual harassment facing live-in domestic workers. And what's even worse is that whether they are live out who are like whether they are live out to work outside the houses or they are live in, they are literally trapped. Why they are trapped? Because many people just want to go back home. They want to travel as soon as possible, and they don't want to stay here in the country. However, because of the sponsorship system, this has been very, very difficult. We're trying to work now on evacuating as much people as possible, but many people cannot afford their tickets. They cannot afford tickets because they have been working for years with very low salaries, so they did not even do any savings. People who did savings, they were literally sending them to their families, because this is the main reason people come here to Lebanon, because they want to support their families back home. People cannot even afford to do the PCR test. They cannot even sometimes afford the transportation from their houses to the airport even. People, even if they don't, sometimes people don't have legal papers. And what do we mean by that? Under the sponsorship system, you have residency permit and work permit. To be able to sustain these permits, you need to stay at the house of your employer and you need to work there. Once you break the contract, which is, by the way, a contract that gives zero protection to the domestic worker. Once you break the contract and you leave the employer's house without their consent, you automatically become illegal. So in the eyes of the state, the domestic worker who escapes the house of the abusers is not a victim, she's a criminal. And hence she is faced with detention and then deportation. So we have many people who are freelancers and who are irregular in the eyes of the states. And many people many of them don't have their passports with them, because they have lost their passports, or actually their passports were taken by force from their employers. So it's also very common for people when they arrive here to be asked from their employer or from the police to hand out their passport and their identification papers to make sure that the worker does not run away from the house. So these challenges have made it hard for people to be able to go back home. And again, there's also another major challenge, which is the legal complaint that can be done by the employer against the domestic worker. So for example, it's very common here in Lebanon, if a domestic worker runs away from my house, so me as a Lebanese employer, it's very easy for me to call the police and tell them that basically she ran away and she stole money. So it's very easy for me to accuse the domestic worker of theft. And actually there are hundreds of migrant workers in detention center because of this theft accusation, even though that very rarely there has been any proof given. So it's always the word of the Lebanese employer versus the word of the domestic worker. So we can see clearly how the sponsorship system and how the Lebanese government and how the Lebanese society are purely racist. And we, like, even the Lebanese government in the response to the crisis has given zero care about migrant workers and refugees in the country and about women domestic workers. So even if in the response to the crisis, the Lebanese government, for example, decided to distribute food packages, they were only given to Lebanese families and to Lebanese workers, not to women domestic workers, for example. And even when they try to distribute some kind of financial compensation for people losing their jobs, also domestic workers and migrant workers were excluded from this. And what has happened also after the COVID-19, it has been harder for people to reach out to us, because if we're talking about live-in domestic worker who is in the house, her employers are like, because their inability to move, and because losing their jobs, and because of many factors, and because the children are no longer at school, they are in the houses. This has definitely imposed more work load on the domestic worker, and even little access to the phone and to the internet to be able to reach out to us in a confidential way. And this also led in many cases to increased violence, especially that the main thing that has been happening after the COVID-19 is the inability of employers to pay their domestic workers, and not inability, actually sometimes it's they just don't want to pay her. We don't want to pay you because now everything is expensive, so I prefer to keep the money for me and I don't pay you back. So the moment that the domestic worker will try to actually demand her right of getting her salary back, or to be paid in dollars, for example, so she is able to send money to her family. In many cases, these discussions were faced with the woman being locked in the rooms, being hidden, being thrown on the streets, being like they even take away their phones from them, etc. So this is a very quick recap of everything that has been happening. And what we're trying to do as anti-racism movement is we're trying to collect funds to help people go back home. Many people are doing so. So there are also many migrant-led community groups like Enyalenya, Mesawat, that are Ethiopian groups, for example, that are trying to work on the ground and doing relief work, cases work, and helping people go back home. We're trying to do the same. We're trying to collect funds, and we're trying to we're trying to coordinate with NGOs in the home countries to be able to support women in reintegration once they reach home. But again, all these efforts will reach only 1,000 or 2,000, maybe in the best cases scenario of 5,000 domestic workers, while we are actually talking about 250,000 that are still here in the country. And not to mention that many women have come here to Lebanon because they were lied to about the work conditions, about what they're coming to do. So many people are actually victims of human trafficking. So this is something else to keep in mind. There are many legal challenges. Now when we receive a case, the court is not operating as before, the police is not operating as before, the shelters that the shelters by the NGOs for domestic workers were already very, very little, and now there's no capacity anymore. So it's even actually harder to respond to any urgent case that we might receive. So it's 5:26, so I think I'm gonna stop now. But I'm gonna send in the chat the links for anti-racism movement and for other groups that are doing amazing work. And you can check our newsletter and our weekly updates, and you can, of course, contact us by email for anything that you would like to know. Thank you.
Rahaf, thank you. That was an excellent presentation. Very clear description of what's happening with domestic workers in Lebanon, everything from them being excluded from labor law to the discriminatory policies of the government and the impact of COVID. So thank you so much for joining us and for sharing what's happening in Lebanon. We do just have a couple of minutes, so I would like to open up for maybe one or two questions. That's probably all we have time for this morning. So feel welcome to raise your virtual hand or indicate that you would like to speak. I see Jeanette would like to speak. I'm not sure if Numa and Nicoline, if those are legacy hands from previous times, but just let me know if you would like to speak in the chat. So I'll hand over to Jeanette. The floor is yours.
Hi, thank you for that wonderful presentation. My question is, are you seeing the form of domestic work that you see there? It seems to be that domestic work is now becoming a human trafficking network for so many women and girls as refugees or even from inside the country? Thank you.
We'll take maybe one more speaking point before we turn back to Rahaf to answer that question. Numa, would you like to speak? I see Hester has also a hand raised, but we'll see if Numa would like to say anything. Okay. If not, over to you, Hester. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for all the excellent presentations. It's been just a very fascinating, if upsetting session. Thank you for organizing it and for bringing us all together. I have a question about the activism that's taking place in Lebanon and whether there's any focus on getting the ILO's Violence and Harassment Convention ratified, or at least on government's radar, because of course the protections in that new international labor law also protect workers such as informal workers, workers without contracts, workers living in people's homes, domestic workers in particular. And I'm just wondering if there's any visible progress on getting that issue advanced in Lebanon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those two excellent questions. So I'll hand over to Rahaf to respond.
Okay. So it's definitely human trafficking, something that the Lebanese government is not willing to listen to, because as per our contact with a lot of people from Kenya, Cameroon, Ethiopia, it's clear that they come through agencies. So here in Lebanon, the recruitment of domestic workers happen through recruitment agencies that are legal and authorized by the Lebanese government. However, what happens is that these recruiting agencies, they are in contact with agencies or with individuals in the home countries. And what happens is that these agencies would target poor areas, for example, poor villages, and they would target even women that are 16, 15, and they would tell them lies about the situation here in Lebanon. So they would tell them that you would come and work as a nurse or in a restaurant, you would be able to continue your education. Many people actually left the college before coming here. So they would tell them that this is why you need to pay. So people already pay in their home countries around $500, $600, $700, which is a huge amount for someone who is already in need. So they would come to Lebanon already in debt. And then what happens is that this recruitment agency would send them to homes with zero explanation about the situation. And in many cases, they were deprived of their salaries for the first 3 months. So the recruitment agency would take the first 3 months of the salary of the domestic workers as their fees. So this is also trafficking. And what happens also, even when they report, like the first contact is the agency. So whenever they face any kind of abuse, they would talk to the agency, of course, and the agent would respond with hitting, with more violence, with forcing her to actually go to another house, with forcing her to work for free, by threatening her, by throwing her on the streets. And we have even agencies that even lock domestic workers, like 6, 7, 10 domestic workers in a very tiny room, and they would lock the office before they leave. So this is something that has been that keeps happening so far. As to answer the second question, and I really hope that I answered the first one. To answer the second one is that there is also the Convention for Domestic Workers, C189. And the Lebanese government has signed this convention but has not ratified it. This is why there have been a major protest. Like what we do every single year is that we organize a protest with migrant community groups, and on Labor Day or on Domestic Workers Day. So every year we have the same demands: abolish the sponsorship system, ratify C189, include domestic workers in the labor law. They have been the same demands for the past 10 years, and still there is no progress at all. Lately, the Lebanese government, like the Minister of Labor, decided to do this amendment for the contract to actually protect domestic workers, but not for the sake of migrant domestic workers. She decided to do this kind of protection to see if that later on she will be able to protect Lebanese domestic workers. Anyway, a few amendments have been done. That's great, but still it was just a piece of paper with zero mechanism being put on the ground. And what happened is that the people of the recruitment agencies filed a complaint against such amendments and forced the court to stop working on this contract because it violates the freedom of contracting that they abide with. So now even when we had 1% chance to protect 1% of the domestic workers, we no longer have that because now it's on hold. So now we're advocating also to not us, but ILO and many other organizations, they're trying with their best to do to overcome this challenge, but we'll see. And also it's it's an unstable situation here in Lebanon politically. So the ministers keep changing, the government, we're waiting a new government to be formed soon. So it's a lot of political mess right now. And we really don't know where we're heading or where we will be in a month or two or even a year.
Thank you so much, Rahaf. And I see that Numa did want to speak, so very, very short. We're right over time. If you can share your thoughts.
Go ahead, Numa.
Yes. Good day, everyone. I'm Numa Berin.
I'm so sorry, you have a bad connection. We can't hear you.
Numa, maybe if you turn off your video, we'll be able to hear you.
From Cameroon, we have a problem of network.
Yeah, if you try to turn off your video, it might be clearer for us to hear you.
No, okay. Okay. Can you hear me now?
But much better.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Numa Berin. I'm the founder and the president of Berin and Bokwes Foundation in Cameroon. I'm empowering widows and orphans in Cameroon. I have 5 years experience. Actually, there is a serious problem of gender-based violence in Cameroon, most especially in villages. Have gone through the whole of Meme division, Northwest province, Southwest province. All those villages around there, we have discovered a very serious problem of gender-based violence. For instance, the ongoing crisis in Cameroon has caused a lot of husbands death, the deaths of husbands. Most widows now, most women now are widows. And this has really increased the rate of malpractices and maltreatment of widows in Cameroon. And during this COVID-19, most widows are displaced because of the ongoing crisis. So what I did is, after discovering these hard situations that the widows were going through, I decided to empower them with antiseptic soap in order to fight against COVID-19 in Cameroon. And also I empowered them with small little businesses to help themselves during this COVID-19. We introduced face masks, hand sanitizers to fight against COVID-19. And we also donate foodstuffs for them because it was not easy for them. And the rate of gender-based violence in Cameroon has really increased. When a young widow lost her husband, it is very difficult for this widow to live with the family of the husband. Most especially, they will force them to remarry the brothers of their husbands. And if this widow refuses, they will come in the night and start raping them. So this has really increased the rate of gender-based violence in Cameroon. I am a victim of that situation. When I lost my husband, My husband's brother was forced to remarry. They asked him to remarry me, to get married to me. I refused because I was forced to go back to school. I wanted to go back to school. And I wanted to stand for the right of my children. So when I refused, I was sent out of the house. They came in the night, they attempted to rape me. And very fortunately, I shouted and people came out. That was how I was rescued. And this is actually what pushed me or motivated me to stand for the rights of widows. I have discovered so many cases of gender-based violence in Cameroon. It's about 40 cases in Southwest Province, the late husband's brothers. They have been raped by the late husband's brothers because of the ill practice of our country. So I am so glad to attend the conference today, the conference meeting today, the CSW. I am so happy to be involved today. And I know with a teamwork, we'll fight against gender-based violence in Cameroon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Numa. And thank you everybody who spoke today, for the active questions in the chat. And it really is such an important issue to continue collaborating on and speaking about. And we hope that all of you will join us for our NGO CSW virtual forum, which will be a space where we continue on these conversations. So thank you all so much. I don't know, Huri, if there was anything
Well,
more to
thank you,
add.
Safira. You are an amazing moderator and you put together an amazing panel. I can just see from our participants, this was so, yes. So now everybody can unmute themselves. This is the final minute that we can really feel connected. Please talk to me, because I know they're dying to get back to work on
Thank
the
you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello. It was a pleasure. Bye.
Good night,
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you all so much for your voices.
Thank you.
Thank you for your voices.
Bye, Linda.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hold on a second.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you, Devin, for all the wonderful tech support.
Hi, Beth.
Wish you all the best.
I know, look at each other's faces. Come on up.
Wish you all the best.
I miss Devin. Oh my gosh, it's so crazy. Hi, Joan.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.